Now live. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the August 7th, 2023 workshop. First on the agenda tonight, we have John Blaze, and to talk about the PAL Center. John, I'd allow you to introduce the folks with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Austin Smith from Simon Architects on my right here, and then Megan McDevitt from Woodard and Curran. They're going to pretty much give most of the presentation today, but just some of the mechanics that have to happen that will include the planning board, and then finally, ultimately, the council is the discontinuance of Chestnut Street as a public way. We'll go over that. There's actually some sketches in your drawings. It's about 250 feet. And we essentially have to follow state statute under Title 23 to do that. We'll be going through that process with public notices and whatnot. The good thing about this one, comparing to Miller Street, the one that we're working on at 186 on Main Street, is that there's no direct abutters that are being affected. It does obviously disturb the connectivity through Winter Street to Webster Street, but there'll be a T-turnaround. We'll have additional parking there, and we'll go over that. In addition to that, we're going to be essentially giving away some for Land and Water Conservation Fund land. There'll be a swap, and in exchange for that, it'll be a portion of Chestnut Street that will become Land and Water Conservation Fund, and then ultimately 7 Chestnut if we're successful in acquiring that parcel as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to making this building fit. There's a lot of site constraints and improvements that really make this a nice development. There is a little bit of budgetary impacts. We've got some survey work that has to happen. Woodard and Curran has actually helped us out with some of those descriptions already. And then there's Yellow Book appraisals that have to happen under the Land and Water Conservation Fund rules. So I just wanted to bring that in front of you guys. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer specific questions to the road discontinuance and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And then, these folks here will get more into the development of the site, and we can hopefully answer those questions as well. All right.
Okay. Well, this is the site. I'm going to back up once. And, this site is situated on Chestnut Street, as John said, and it's strategically located between these 2 neighborhoods and the green belt that I'm sure you're all conscious of. Ball fields, soccer pitches, futsal, basketball courts, and that played a very sort of integral part of our site design. And we positioned the building there on Chestnut to serve both sides. And here's a close-up of the existing conditions. The photograph on the lower right-hand side is the existing PAL Center, which was a wood frame structure repurposed to serve this community. And this is the existing site survey. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Megan to sort of outline some of the issues with the site that dictated our design.
Thank you, Austin. So as you saw from the picture before, it's a vast green area. You would think we have ample space to locate this building. Unfortunately, what you see isn't always true. And during our survey, we found that there are some other items on the site, things below grade, that impact where we can site this new PAL facility. And I apologize if I keep turning, it's just to see the slide. But on the north side of the screen, you see these 2 long kind of parallel lines going through each other, and they kind of have a diagonal turn in them. That's actually an underground sewer system and an underground storm drain. And it's a very large storm drain. It actually drains all of Pettingale Pond that's up north of it. Those are very deep. I think they're almost 20 feet in depth. So trying to relocate those or move those would be very costly. But we want to make sure that we don't locate the building on top of them so that they're available should there ever need to be any future maintenance on them. So that is like kind of one of our site constraints. Also, maybe John can point out the gray line, which is the Land and Water Conservation Fund line that we're trying to work with in those boundaries or stay out of those boundaries with our proposed structure. And then also in Chestnut Street itself, there are also underground utilities. There's water, there's sewer, gas, and things like that. That again, we don't want to locate our building on top of those utilities. So we are kind of pinned between that, plus basic things that you see as site constraints like property lines, right-of-ways, and things like that. So those are all kind of the constraints of the site of where we have to kind of pin our new building in between. And if you go to the next one, you can see here, this is our proposed site plan with the new building, and Austin is going to sit here and talk about the proposed kind of programming and stuff that we've done. But one of the important things you can see here is that we have closed off Chestnut Street here and put a connecting right-of-way and part of the building even in that. And this is really important because what we're trying to do is provide a safe, connective campus so that you can get all the way across the site. And so the children feel safe, secure, and stuff as they're using the PALS building and either going down to the lower fields or staying up on the football fields and things like that. Everything is nice and easy for them to get to, but there's still that pedestrian connectivity through that area.
Just to kind of add a little bit to that. So, the site is set up in a way that, the city, no matter what, finds 100% success, right? Because this is the land and water conservation boundary. We centered the building on that. So if the deal falls through on 7 Chestnut, or if for whatever reason the feds don't like the idea of the swap, or the appraisal doesn't work out, we're still moving forward with this. But if we acquire more land here, that allows for expansion in the future. It allows more flexibility if we run into soil condition issues, and we have more flexibility with construction and programming and things like that. But right now, I think the consultants have done an excellent job for success for the future with the flexibility of what's laid out here right now.
So we started this design process. The first step we do is to engage the user groups and the clients, and we go through a programming exercise, and we question them. We basically come up with their wish list. It's an aspirational process. It's very sort of blue sky thinking, and we came up with a program of 20,000 square feet. It included a daycare center, a medical center, dental, and so forth. And we stopped at that point, and we engaged a local building contractor, H.E. Callahan, and had them advise us on construction cost and our specific building. And what we determined is basically we could build a building between 13,000 and 14,000 square feet, which is a happy coincidence because it just fits on the site that Megan described. And this is a regular part of the process I'm sure you're familiar with. We have to go back and we have to prioritize which program elements should be established first. We have to think about flexibility, what spaces can serve multiple purposes, and so forth. So with that, we came up with this design. I want to stress at this point we're 20% complete with the design. We have another 5 to 6 months to continue to refine this building, to engage with the users, and make sure that we get it right. We do have the advantage of having a construction manager on board, which is Landry French. They are currently pricing the package that we're presenting to you tonight, to double check that we're on budget and on schedule, which is really important. They'll do that another 2 times in this process. This is an elevation or a rendering. As a design team, I think we had 4 goals. We wanted to make sure that we had a functional building, that it served the users and the program. We wanted to make sure that it was durable. A lot of the users are teens, and we wanted to make sure it was an appropriate place for them, that they could be teenagers. There were no precious surface that could be damaged. And we also wanted to make sure this was a facility that could serve the city of Auburn for the next 50 years. We wanted to make sure it was affordable, that we didn't want to have a lot of architectural embellishments. We wanted to put that money into the program space and to meet the needs of those users. And we wanted to make it beautiful. I think that's something that Rita stressed. We want the users to make sure that they have a sense of deserving this facility, that they have a sense that they are valued by the city of Auburn, and that it serves their purposes and their needs for years to come. We look forward to sharing the progress with you as many times as necessary to keep you up to speed on our design. but this is what we have thus far. And I think we're happy to field any questions you might have. Yes?
Thank you. Did you get rid of a lot of that glass outside the building?
We did. We heard that from the user groups that, and that was twofold. We wanted to make it more affordable, and we wanted to make it more efficient. So we reconsidered where we put the glass. It's mostly around the entries and around areas that could benefit from the daylight. And we also have glass on the south face with views to the distance. But we drastically reduced, I think we reduced the glazing by 60% or more.
Because safety of the kids in the building or anybody in there was one of my concerns is too much. If a parent had a protection order out on them, they could watch their kids, and it would be bad if they kind of got a hold of them.
Very good point, yes.
Football field, how much of it we're taking to do this? Is it gonna be the same size as now, or is it gonna be a smaller football field?
No, the football field's gonna be maintained. We don't anticipate taking any of the football field land at this point.
Second, the street. I've already heard from quite a few of the people, if you're gonna do away with that street, how many meetings are we gonna have before that all becomes part of this?
So there'll be an approval process through the planning board. There'll be a public hearing on it with a recommendation to council. And then from there, there'll be 2 council meetings, one being a public hearing.
And this is on top of, we've had several public communications or public meetings concerning the Powell Center last 6 to 9 months, if I remember correctly. Bill?
We have, and we also had a neighborhood meeting as well, where we had early sketches and designs and talked to the neighborhood. So we certainly have. We know that Chestnut Street closing is controversial, right? We know that's an issue for the neighborhood. However, when we start taking a look at safety, we do have kids that are, the team has been out there to take a look at the center, and we constantly have kids back and forth in that traffic. And so safety-wise, we see this as the best move forward as we expand on this site.
So if we could just, first of all, the plans are great. Landry and French is a phenomenal developer and construction company, and with some local ties here with Dennis Landry, of course, being from Auburn, Lewiston. So when we're looking at this, looking at the time frame, if we acted now, we're probably looking at potential street closure in the next 2 months. It's going to take the firms another 5 to 6 to get architectural, civil, everything wrapped up. The earliest construction could start would be, I'm assuming, spring of '24.
Correct, that's our target date, yes.
12-month, 18-month construction period?
12 months.
12 months? There's an opening of spring of '25 if everything goes according to plan, which won't. And then from a financial standpoint, total cost, is it 9?
So $9 million is where we're targeting, I think. So this is one where, as we bring this before the council, because council certainly has allocated a great deal of either ARPA funds, some capital funds. We've also received some congressional earmark funds. However, this is also one of those kind of public, quasi-private partnerships, because we also have the PAL organization that is also receiving these funds through the congressional earmark. So as we navigate, part of it's coming before the council as far as the road closure, some of those items, and then there's also another arm of this, which is the PAL board itself. And so we'll continue navigating that with you. But $9 million is the goal. There's currently $7.5 million that's allocated, and then there'll be obviously some ramp up with some community support as well.
Is it still intended to be a full-size basketball court?
It is.
Official length, so.
It is high school regulation. I must admit the margins around the basketball court are small. The last feedback we got from the client was to increase the depth for spectators on one side. But originally, we had enough space for 200 spectators, and we've reduced that, again, to meet that target square footage of 1,300 to 1,400 square feet.
I think if it was equal to what's at the rec, if you go in there, there's enough room on one side for people to sit and the teams can sit on the other side. You don't need a ton of spectators. I think the functionality outweighs a lot of spectators, so.
And a credit to the city is that they salvaged the backboards from Bonnie Eagle High School, I'm sorry, Edward Little High School, and for reuse in the center.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's
A
good.
lot of games won there.
That's good luck. We'll probably recycle the floor the next week too if we hustle. Okay, so next
That'd be
steps.
kind of cool, actually.
Huh?
That'd be kind of neat, actually.
Yeah, it would be. Okay, we'll think about that. So next steps right now, the most immediate thing. Unless there are any other questions or if we want to debate the pros and merits of this, we've gone down this road for the last 2 years pretty intensely, even up to the point of allocating $4.5 million from either ARPA or bond. So I think we move forward to the planning board. Do we have a schedule on that? The second meeting in August?
Yeah, so we actually, I missed one piece, Mr. Mayor. We will have a workshop on this. We'll cover this, actually this Thursday. We'll be covering this with the planning board as a workshop. And then the following month, September meeting rather, we'll have the public hearing.
So we'll see this come back before council October.
Yeah, October.
November.
Or yeah. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Good? Good? Awesome. Hey, and first of all, on behalf of the entire city, thank you very much for the work, a lot of which has been pro bono, and knowing Phil, all of it. So we really, really do. It was good to see your firms at LeaderCast and everything else we've been doing to try to build support financially and just community support for this project. So we're very, very happy.
Well, I should add, we are consultants to Woodward and Curran. We're grateful for them including us in this process. So thank you, Megan.
No, this is going to be great. We're excited. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you very much.
Next, new housing starts and projections leading into T-4.2B and beyond. Eric Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've had a lot of questions about what are we seeing for new housing over the past few years, where is it going, and thought this was a good opportunity to just give a brief overview and answer any questions that the council may have. I have a different message blocking part of that view here, so. So we'll go over the new units that have been picked up by the assessor's office over the last few years, 2020 to 2023. That goes to April 1st of this year. Coming soon in 23, we will go over the units that have been permitted, or mostly permitted, that seem likely to start this summer. Since March or so of this year that didn't get picked up by the assessors. We've mapped those. If you want to take a look at them from a map view, we can turn on other layers if you want to compare them to zoning districts, water and sewer availability. But we have mostly stayed true to growing from our urban core. I think that's one thing the map shows, is that we really are growing majority of our housing. There are some exceptions, but a majority of them are in existing water and sewer served areas, in areas that already have a pretty dense pattern of development. And then go over briefly some of the projects that have started permitting or are far enough along that we can talk about their locations publicly. And we expect those to come to fruition in the next year or so, as well as just some general numbers of projects that are still really under consideration, discussion phase. No chance of getting all of them, but certainly some of them will continue through the process if they remain feasible. So 2020 to 2023 was the time period that we pulled results. During that time period, the assessor has picked up 84 new single and two-family units. That's a unit count, so if there was a single that was turned into a two-family, that would count as one. But there's a total of 84 new units in one and two-family homes during that time period. 264 multifamily units, and the map to the left is really a heat map showing the location of those permits, so you can see where they're concentrated. Since March of this year, right around the April 1st deadline for the assessors to pick up new units and not yet under construction at that time, we've permitted 20 new single and two-family units. Those include standalone single families, they include condominiums, and they include mobile homes. We've seen a lot of mobile home replacements over that period of time. There's a number of parks that are really upgrading the age of the homes in the parks with new homes. 141 multifamily units during that same period. I'll go to the map, and if there are any questions about where they are, what zoning districts they're in, I'm happy to answer those. It's making me log in. So the icons here are, the smallest boxes are single-family units you can see throughout the city. The larger boxes are sized based on the number of units. You're familiar with a lot of the projects, I think. They're not surprising that we have a large box right on Mount Auburn Avenue. Court Street, individual boxes, they were permitted as separate units, so they're showing up as individual buildings. But there are 60 units permitted on Court Street as of April 1st of this year, and 24 additional units since then. South Auburn, we're seeing a lot around the Turnpike area. Sassavilles have built 48 units there, as well as a number of condo buildings that have been built out. I don't know if you want to see those based on any other information, but I think it is really clear as you add the other layers that we are seeing these in areas that have the utilities, that have the existing transportation infrastructure, and we've been working to try to build that out with new projects as we approve projects, requiring sidewalk extensions, that kind of thing. Any questions on those maps?
Eric, could you just zoom into 42, 42B, 51, downtown? And specifically, I'd like to see if there's any localized small level development, i.e. ADUs, a split parcel for a single family or duplex. A little bit of directional, if you would, on that.
Yeah, so there are some. I think I have another slide later on as well. There is certainly a concentration of those units within the urban core. Not all of them are in T42. I think they're pretty spread between T42, T42B, T51, and general business. Those are the four districts that we're really seeing a lot of those developments in. Form-based and general business, which already had a very generous, more so than most of the form-based codes, generous density allowance at 17 units per acre. So there are a number of them within, say, the Court Street T42B area. But this one down here in T51 is the Brickyard Circle development. That's 96 units. Minded Avenue, there was a refit of a building that had a roof collapse a number of years ago, and they added a number of units there. And then as you move to the north, you can see these sort of one-off additional units as New Ranch at that location on Lake Street. That one in particular on the corner of Sunset and Lake is one that wasn't possible before the new zoning, but it has been possible with the T42B. Granite Street area, we've seen a couple of ADUs added where people converted a garage to a single-family unit, small unit. We talked about that at the community conversation the other night. There's not I don't think there's an overwhelming concentration in the district, T42B, but it certainly has freed up opportunity for people to create more units.
Eric, what have you seen as far as ADUs? And you just mentioned one. Rough guess, how many would you say have probably been permitted in the last couple of years?
I don't have the number, I guess, off the top of my head for ADUs. It hasn't been 100 of them, a dozen or more, I would safely say, but I could get those numbers. And they're either ADUs or a lot of them have been able to, because of the smaller lot size, actually split the parcel and obtain separate financing for the extra units in the T42 and T42B in particular, whereas if you have if you're adding an ADU, you almost have to finance the principal structure, refinance or borrow against it in order to build it. You can't typically get entirely separate financing for a second dwelling to sit on somebody else's land. So that's an obstacle for some people, but it certainly also has allowed some families to move back together on a single parcel in one ownership as well.
When you were zoomed out, it looked like there was quite a bit going on down in, I don't know, down towards Danville in South Auburn. Might be over in Danville Corner Road area.
Yeah.
It looked like there was quite a few units going on there. Is that a subdivision?
There's a couple of areas down in the southern part of the city where we've seen a lot. Colonial Ridge condos is one of those areas. This one is Presidential Way, Buford McFarland's development off of Danville Corner Road. And then we've seen a lot over towards the airport, Kitty Hawk Apartments with 48 new units. That one's general business over there. And those were old approvals where the economics didn't make sense for a couple of decades, really. And that's changed recently, and they're building out stuff that had been approved for.
And I just talked to the owner actually last week. He wanted me to point out to the president what he was doing, which I did actually. But he has approval for 3 more 24 units, buildings there, that I was granted 15 years ago plus. So looks like pre-leasing is done, just as an update. They're already taken. So I think people are going to try to move in tomorrow. So.
Yeah, I think we just recently issued the certificate of occupancy for that second building. Happy to share that map if there are other questions or if you want to go through it on your own. But that's really a summary of what we have permitted over the last few years that have already hit the tax rolls, as well as what's permitted now that we expect to hit the tax rolls next year with the 141 new units. These are, I titled it In the Works for the projects that are far along enough that we can share the address and any details that you have questions with. And then the future possibilities are projects that don't necessarily have an exact address that we could share, but they're multiple projects spread over a large portion of the city. 405 Center Street was approved with 21 units at the planning board recently, but the costs of building that one were just not feasible. So they've redesigned the site. They're going back to planning board on Thursday night this week with a redesigned site, and they still hope to deliver 21 units. Lake Street School, 8 to 12 units. That had gone out to bid. Hopefully we're close to selecting one of those, but everything that we saw for proposals were in that range. Harriman Drive, 48 units. This is something we've been talking with Tim Millett about. There's an undeveloped lot on Harriman Drive that can accommodate 48 units, and we expect to have something for planning board in September or October for the following month's meeting. Stable Ridge, Phase 2, there's 24 units permitted and under construction and another 36 that are approved by planning board but have not gone through a building permit process yet. 186 Main Street, really exciting mixed-use project that I know the city has been really involved with putting together. Brewery and 14 units. And as far as future possibilities, there are a number of projects throughout the city. I think we've talked about Grace Lawn and the zoning change out there that would deliver units. There are projects in sort of the urban core of the city that would deliver a mix of single family, two-family condos and multifamily homes. I'd say all in all, total in discussion. And again, we talk about a lot of projects early on where people are testing the feasibility that never make it to the finish line. So I wouldn't count on this many units, but we've had discussions for at least approximately 1,900 units throughout the rest of the city that are not listed in the previous slides.
So maybe, I don't know if this is the best time to bring this up, but throughout the discussions over housing over the last couple of years, I've heard lots of different comments from constituents about the price of the housing units that are being built. Are you seeing through your office a variety of different types of housing coming through and different types of developers that want to build various housing units at various different costs? Is that something you're seeing? Is it all market driven? Like, could you maybe talk to that?
Yeah, we are, and I think this slide tries to get at some of that. It's expensive to build single-family homes, and it's really, I know John Blaze has put together some numbers for our discussion with Planning Board tomorrow night, but just in the past year, average incomes seem to have gone up by about $9,000 a year in Auburn. But the cost of housing has gone up even more. And an average couple in Auburn, or two-family household, two-income earners, still can't afford a single-family home. A firefighter and a teacher, as an example, that works for Auburn can't afford to buy a new house in Auburn. We're seeing single families anywhere from $250,000 on the really low end, and most of those were closer to 2019 than now. We're not seeing many under 300,000 now to $1 million. Duplex, two families, we're seeing anywhere from 400 to 600, and we've seen a couple that are over that for 2 units. Multifamilies is where you can start to get those costs down to less than 200,000 per unit, based on the numbers we're seeing on permits. But even that, a lot of the projects that we're seeing are well over $200,000 per unit for multifamily housing. Then we see rents, pushing $2,000 a month, but that's really what it takes to pay for a $250,000 unit with taxes and utilities and higher interest rates than what we had before. There is a real affordability problem. Due to construction costs as well as financing costs. Duplex condos, we're seeing some in the Colonial Ridge area. They're single-level condos with 2 units, over $700,000 in construction costs. And that's what's being declared on the permits before running into any unexpected site constraints and things like that during construction. Even mobile homes that we're seeing are right in that $100,000 range now, where they used to be easily half that. But the replacement homes that we're seeing for brand new homes are in that $80,000 to $150,000 range, and you have to pay the association fees for being in the park that they're located in. There are people building units of all types still. We're still talking with people adding new units to existing developed parcels as well as new subdivisions. Costs are really high compared to a few years ago. We talked a little bit about that. Existing structures are not assessed for the same amount that we're seeing the investments in the new ones. We don't have those values in, $250,000 per unit. We don't see that in our assessed values, but we're seeing developers build those. Supply of housing is driving some of that cost. Labor is hard to get. It's hard to line up contractors and get them to show up on your job instead of another job, as well as interest rates have really delayed some of the projects that we've had in the pipeline for a while. Multifamily and mobile homes are our lowest per unit cost. The ADU conversions, accessory structures, I think, are another opportunity for more affordable housing. We've been working with CDBG and Zach and Glenn's team on some programs to encourage those. And we've put forward, with Zach's help, a zoning amendment that will correct a problem with our ordinance that in Auburn we've required a minimum of 700 square feet for single-family homes. The state law changed to allow 0 to 400 square foot tiny homes, but you can't add on to a 400-foot home unless you go over 700, which doesn't make any sense. So we'll be working with the planning board and coming back to you to correct that. Those smaller homes are a real opportunity for, not a tiny home necessarily, but a real opportunity to provide a house at an affordable price. Projects are definitely taking longer. We've seen a number of them that we thought would have been constructed a year or more ago. Mount Auburn Avenue AR development is a good example, as well as Brickyard Circle, but financing, contractors, reworking estimates to cut costs, all of those things have delayed those projects, but they look like they're moving now. And again, it's not all one zoning district. We are seeing development in the core of the city, but it's in multiple zoning districts, especially the form-based code and the general business zoning districts. With that, happy to answer any questions.
If I could, before we have some questions, I just want to give everybody kind of a base point number to go off of. We started really pushing hard for growth in housing back in 2020. 2021, it was with results coming in from the 2020 census compared to the 2010 census. I was actually just today reviewing a feasibility study for a topic we're going to talk about later. They projected, based upon tracking, that between 2020 and 2025, Auburn would only add 119 housing units. That was a projection based upon the historical trend. I lost count. I was trying to keep up with you, Eric. I know we have, well, right there, from 2020 to 2023, we're talking over 348 units. Plus the ones that are in talks now. So when we set that goal of 2,000 housing units by 2025, from everything I can see right now, it looks like we're going to hit that by 2025 and then some. And it's an absolute necessity because that 119 new housing units projected back in 2020 meant a population decrease and a year and a half added to our average age, which would be devastating for the long-term sustainability of the city. So thank you very much for providing this. I think there's some great, sensible takeaways here that, allowing individuals the ability to be developers with single family and duplexes works. We're seeing that in form-based code. I think other than the blip at the airport, which is absolutely understandable, Sassaville's development, we are seeing inside-out growth. So it seems that we're in compliance with comp plan directives, strategic plan directives and wishes, and this is reassuring. This gives me a lot of hope, and hopefully it does everybody in Auburn, because without people, bad things happen. Schools get closed down, businesses can't expand, tax base deteriorates. So there's definitely some good trajectory. So thank you very much, Eric, on this.
Thank you.
Can you give us the final number they ended up with on Mount Auburn Avenue? I know it was sort of going up and down depending on negotiations with the fire.
It started at 128 and then it ended at 102. So it's still slightly over 100, but they were really trying to shave costs at that point.
Eric, when your office sees somebody that asks about building a house or some units or whatever, what are the types of things that you're telling them if you have to say no, or if you have to tell them to come back and rework it? What are the things that you're seeing people asking to do that they can't do?
We always try to, if the plan in front of us doesn't work, we try to understand what their goals are and then try to see where you could make adjustments to that plan to meet their goals. I think, building in the agricultural zone is one that we have to say no to a lot. There are a lot of, anytime a lot comes up for sale in that zone, The pricing is really favorable compared to large blocks of land in the rest of southern Maine. So people try to find a way to make that work. Adding, it is, yep, and we're talking to some people about it, but it hasn't been a flood of, no actual applications yet. I think a big one, and I talked to Phil a little bit about this, is when you have an existing single family or a two family is most often, if you want to add one unit to existing space in your building, then the state fire code requires you to sprinkle the whole building. Hopefully we can have some talks over the coming months about maybe there's a way to make sure that the existing units meet a certain minimum standard and sprinkle the new unit, but maybe not the whole building. That is an obstacle for a lot of people trying to add one unit to existing spaces, and those are common. The other ones are setbacks, I guess. If setbacks are in the way, that's less common with the T42 zoning districts, or all of our form-based code zoning districts, because they allow that more traditional pattern. And I'd say those are probably the most common, other than shorefront, where people want to build larger than what shoreline at a state level allows for.
Is there any more questions or comments? I mean, I love, Dana, your question was great. I love that. I'm excited to see what kind of the rezoning efforts are within the ag, because if we can eliminate that artificial scarcity with regards to land, and that should drive down land cost, and land costs are the single largest, line item to build a home. So hopefully we can start mitigating some of that. There's not much in the way of cost control measures that we as a municipality can control, especially on single family. We have done some really good grants with ADUs, and I'll talk about that later during communication. But if there's any other ideas on how we can help minimize costs, keeping our tax rate flat, that's huge. Okay, that's a very good, movement in the right direction. But if there's any other ideas anybody has, I think now is the time to, ask Eric and Phil and start investigating some of those concepts.
I appreciate Glenn and Zach over there trying to help out with some of the zoning stuff too. That's a great idea to bridge that gap.
Okay, that's all. Yeah, and you are going to make this available, this report to us, Eric?
Yes, we can make sure it's available, and I'll just have to check on permissions, because right now I think the permissions are limited, but we can get it expanded and make that published.
Published on the website?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
What is the final count, Eric, though? I mean, there's three categories. 1900 was proposed, and then you had about, 350, or I had 500.
Yeah, there's close to
Nine?
five. I'd have to add those numbers up again. And some of them aren't built. They seem very likely, but close to 500 over the last 4 years, including what we expect over the next 12 months.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Woodward and Curran is back on board again. Talk about public safety buildings.
All right, well, thank you all. Interesting topic to jump into, since we just mentioned fire sprinklers and things like that. So I'm sure Chief Chase's ears were getting all perked up. So let's talk about public safeties then. So really I want to just kind of start by going through a timeline of really how did we get where we were, or where we are now today. So back in 2011, the Auburn Police Department was located at 1 Minot Ave. And at that time, it was determined there were some really costly structural upgrades and remediation that was required due to health concerns. So as a cost-saving measure, Auburn Police relocated to this building here, so until the city could come up with a permanent solution for that. And at that time, the goal was that it was going to be 5 years to figure out the permanent solution for Auburn PD. That was 12 years ago, and we're still in this temporary solution of PD being located here. And I want to turn it over to Chief Moen at this point just to talk about some of the operational challenges that his staff and his department has by being located in this building right now.
Thank you, Megan. Excuse me. So, honestly, this building was never designed to be a police station, and there are several operational challenges that we've had to overcome over the years. One of them being prisoner processing, where we don't have a dedicated facility to be able to do OUI testing and whatnot, and we have to rely on other agencies' equipment to make that happen, which can be difficult at times. We have about 55 male employees on staff that are sharing one shower and one bathroom downstairs, which makes that a challenge when you have officers that are working out before their shift or whatnot and trying to get ready for their shifts. The locker room area is quite small. There are some ventilation issues that are starting to pop up in there. I think if you recall back about 4 or 5 years ago, we had proposed a SAP project to redo the locker rooms, which is then spurred into this public safety building project. Also, our secured storage, there's a slide here where you'll see where we had some flooding outside of our evidence room here a couple weeks ago. Luckily, we were able to get sandbags in there in time before we were able to sustain any damage to that area. So we have a lot of challenges that we've overcome over the years, but as we get busier, as our call volume grows, that multiplies those challenges. So staff is working with the best that they have to meet those challenges, but it's become grinding on our staff.
Thank you, Chief. And we just heard that the city's desire is to grow. So we want to make sure that the public safety facilities can grow and support that additional development. So in 2017, Woodard & Kern, along with Simon's Architects, did a space needs analysis and site evaluation to look at what possibilities there were for a combined public safety facility, knowing back then that PD was still a temporary solution. The result of that is we looked at city-owned properties as well as land that was available for purchase at that time, and we determined that Central Station was the best location for a combined public safety facility. Then in 2019 is the project that Chief Moen just alluded to, where there was an attempt to retrofit the temporary solution to better fit their needs, but the cost was too exorbitant. And that's when the city realized they really needed to understand the condition of all of their public safety facilities. Not only the structural condition of the buildings, but the operational challenges, the configurations, just really how are these facilities that were built back in the 70s, 50s times, how do they work with today's needs? So those funds were reallocated, a comprehensive assessment was completed. We went and looked at all the facilities and met with the chiefs and staffs and really understood all the things going in there. And it was reaffirmed during that time that Central Station continues to be the best location for a combined public safety facility. In addition to identifying that location, it was also determined at that time that it was recommended the city procure the parcel just adjacent to Central Station to ensure there was adequate space and land available so that the public safety facility could not only meet current needs, but also be big enough to meet future needs of the city. And at that time, we, the consultants, got to see firsthand some of the challenges that Chief Chase has at Central Station with how his station is currently configured for the staff of today. And so, Chief Chase?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've all heard me speak previously about some of our operational challenges, particularly around our tower truck, our aerial device. That is out at the Center Street station because it's the only place that really can accommodate and hold it. But it certainly operationally is not the optimal place for that piece of equipment to be. It should be centrally located in the city at Center Street, at Central Station. But the floors, the building will not support the weight of that truck. So we're at significant operational disadvantages of that truck having to be up to Center Street. If you think about that, it's designed to be a tower truck, but it if you will, it doubles as an engine, but it has very, very minimal water on it. So if it's going out North Auburn, behind Lake Auburn at all, it's got very little water to do any fire suppression operations. And it's a long time before the cavalry shows up in some of those locations. So operationally, we've really been looking to get that truck moved into the central district, and there's the need for some level of building improvement to make that happen. But above and beyond that big operational concern, There are a lot of newly designed or new safety features incorporated in designs for fire stations. A couple of the number one killers of firefighter and firefighter safety concerns are cancer. You've heard me talk a lot about that, and cardiovascular health and cardiovascular disease. Modern stations are designed so that they're really built with what we call a dirty area, a warm zone, and a cold zone or a clean area. And there's a progression so firefighters and equipment go from coming back from a fire with all of those carcinogens on them to the ability to start to clean themselves and decon that and get it off of them and their equipment. And they're not bringing that into their living quarters with them where they continue to get exposed to those carcinogens for the rest of their 24-hour shift. And so those are a lot of the safety concerns that we don't have those capabilities and really would struggle to find the ways to redo the facilities to make that happen because they just were never functionally built for that. And then the last piece I would really stress that's called out in some of these slides is, the fire service, and we certainly are trying to become a much more diverse workforce. And diversity takes on many, many forms. But that becomes particularly important when we talk about bathroom facilities. Fire stations are homes as well. So sleeping facilities and those types of things. We have at Central Station, one of our bathrooms has 3 stalls, 2 urinals, and 2 showers, and there is no space to change or get dressed or undressed between those 2 showers, right? So they aren't accommodating to the diversity that we want to see and the diversity we currently have in our workforce. And so coupled with all of those things, the firefighter safety concerns, we have, taken on EMS. There are a lot of functional designs associated with being able to maintain patient confidentiality. EMS is has a high demand for writing reports and keeping that confidential. We don't have the spaces for those. So our mission has changed, our workforce has changed, the city has changed, and there's the need for the station to change to accommodate those new needs.
Thank you, Chief. So these are just some of the pictures kind of speaking to the items that Chief mentioned and their operational challenges with the current facility, which, Auburn does a great job maintaining their facilities. They're just antiquated for the forces and the way they operate these days. So after the completion of the comprehensive facility assessment in 2020, the City Council resolved to create an ad hoc committee to really look at and vet out the design options, cost estimates, and really come together and provide the City Council a final recommendation of what should we do with the public safety facilities. At the same time, the city did go ahead and procure that land adjacent to Central Station, so that is now owned by the city. And the committee was formed in the end of 2021, and we started having kind of bi-weekly meetings in 2022. Here is a list of all the members that were representative and part of the ad hoc building committee. I am not going to read all the names, but as you can see, it is a very diverse group with members from the public as well as outside consultants, as well as city staff, all participating in those meetings. During those meetings, we were vetting all options. Do we do a new combined public safety facility? Do we renovate Central Station? Do we do 2 separate buildings? All those, do we find other locations? All those things were vetted in great detail, and eventually a final recommendation was provided to City Council about 1 year ago, last summer in 2022. And this was the result of the recommendation. It is to design and construct a new right-size, purpose-built public safety facility at Central Station that will meet the needs of today as well as the future of the public safety departments here in Auburn. This building would include a police department, it would house the firing department, it would have an emergency operations center. All of the public spaces would be shared among the 2 of them, and there would also be space to accommodate future growth within that building. Other parts of this kind of new facility campus would include a standalone firing facility, rolling asset storage, significant site improvements, including a new fire training tower as well. Purchasing of the land adjacent to Central Station will allow for phased construction. This is the location of the current Central Station, so we need to make sure those operations stay intact while the new facility is being constructed. So that is part of the reason for that additional land and that phased construction approach. And currently 911 dispatch is located in the basement of Central Station. They will be relocated to an off-site and no longer part of this combined public safety facility. So you may ask, why? Why a combined public safety facility when they're currently separated? Well, the trend we are seeing with a lot of municipalities here in the New England region and really all over is to co-locate your departments because it allows for you to create a more efficient facility. When you have those departments together, there are shared spaces and shared building systems that allow for you to use among both groups. These are things like the public lobby and the waiting area. These are training rooms that can be shared by the department, fitness center, conference rooms. That emergency operations center can also benefit as a community room. And even just the systems, there's a lot of systems that go into maintaining buildings. You've got your mechanical, your electrical, your backup generators, your utilities, and things like that. So by having a single building to house both departments, we feel like there is a lot of shared space there. And in the updated space needs analysis that was done as part of the 2022 ad hoc building committee, we determined by combining the two buildings together, the two departments, there could be over 8,000 square feet of shared space that would help kind of refine and right size that new public safety building. So here's the final recommendation. Based on that updated space needs assessment, the new construction would be about 48,000 square feet. Which would also include an additional 6,000 to 7,000 square feet that could be built out into the future. The shell of that would be constructed as part of the project, and then the interior could be built out as needed to support the growth of the departments. We also have a 3,400-foot firing range and a 2,800 square foot rolling asset storage that would be located within the facility. These two floor plans you see on your right here, they are not 20% like the Powell Center. They are much lower, very much concept level. It's pretty much just to understand the space needs and how much space each department needs. But those two different varying kind of blue colors represent the space that is required to do all of the different departments within the police. You know, your patrol, your criminal investigation, your administration. The varying reds represent the fire department. Kind of your neutral browns and grays there are your shared common space, shared fitness space, and that big green area that you see on the lower plan would be kind of that future space that would be just constructed as a shell and then could be built out in the future as needed. The construction costs here that we have estimated, they have been projected to be in $2025, as that's the estimated soonest that the project could probably begin to be construction. But construction cost is just under $36 million for the building and all the site improvements associated with it. Design fees would include your engineering, all your permit requirements, traffic studies, and things like that. That's about $4.4 million. And then FF&E, your fixtures, finishes, and equipment, as well as an owner contingency, because we all know, we've heard it today, things don't always go perfectly. We were carrying another $4.8 million in that for a total project cost of just over $45 million for the project. Should be noted, similar to Powell Center, this does have a congressional earmark that's already been awarded to it, so that is $2.5 million. That would help reduce that $45 million. That does have a deadline, though, of December 2025 to expend those funds. So one thing the ad hoc committee did was look at that and make sure they compared this to other facilities that are being constructed around to make sure that we weren't asking for too much. We really were right-sizing it. And so here I just want to show, I'll go back. I'll show a couple right now here of what some similar populations are. So this was the public safety facility that Scarborough completed in 2020. Slightly smaller community than Auburn here, but their public safety facility was about 53,000 square feet. Their construction costs estimated into $2025 is about $28 million. And again, these are the construction costs. They may not include all the soft costs, some of their fixtures, furnishings, or design fees up front. This one is Dedham, Mass. Again, a facility that's probably a little closer in line as far as the size of the municipality to Auburn. A bigger facility at 84,000 square feet, but as you can see, the construction of this is closer to $70 million. And this was just recently completed, so it does a lot of the COVID factors, the inflation, all that were taken into these prices. Next one is Hingham, Mass. Again, a similar size at about 24,000 people. The facility here just under 49,000 square feet. This has just started construction, and as of right now, The dollars when they put it out to bid in November was about 47 million. We're projecting that'd be about 54 million here in 2025. So as you can see, what the committee recommended wasn't overreaching, wasn't asking for more, really spent a lot of effort in trying to right size and get a facility that was adequate to serve this size community. So if I go back here, what happens if we do nothing? We just continue the status quo, police stay with their temporary solution. There are ramifications of doing that, right? We know these are older buildings. There are definitely investments that will be needed to maintain the systems, as well as do different upgrades to accommodate diverse workforce, operational concerns, safety, worker safety, and all things like that. Because the police share space at this city hall here with city staff, currently city staff have to lease office space outside this area, so there are shared or additional expenses used because there's limited space within this building currently. And honestly, having poor facilities is an issue with retaining and attracting talent. One of the reasons the chiefs want to do this is they want people who want to work here. They take pride in working for the city of Auburn, and we want to have those key individuals who will be there when your citizens need help working here. There's also mentioned a lot from Chief Chase is health and safety of the workers, and really just being able to maintain and respond to that growth that you guys are all projecting and looking for. And so, with that, this is what we envision as a potential future of the Auburn Public Safety Facility. And I'll just hand it back to the chiefs if you guys have any closing comments or anything you'd like to add.
One of the things I would just say, we are currently having to have discussions and develop plans, hopefully temporary, low-cost plans, but to accommodate the diverse workforce. That is here upon us now. There are expenses that we are going to have to bear to provide people reasonable privacy accommodations and some human rights aspects that we'll be working on now. So there's certainly there is a cost to
If, Chief, do you have anything else? You're good? Okay. So, Phil, could you just give us or Brian, give us the schedule of events, how this is going to work out over the next 4 months?
So what the schedule would be is the presentation this evening, just kind of outlining again the process of how we got to where we are. We would hope to have final language because of the size of this bond. It does need to go out to referendum because it's over 9%. So the final language would be presented and voted on at the August 21st meeting by council. If that is approved, then it would be on the November 6th ballot. And so Sue would need to have the final language and obviously the approval by council to file all of the necessary paperwork with the state. And so that would be the process. So I know it's been a long time coming, but we're kind of at the final crossroads here of moving this forward and having the community weigh in.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Any questions on design?
Yeah, sure. So I guess when I see all these other comparable facilities, the question that immediately pops to my head is how are these funded? And is there anything that we can learn from how all these other communities were able to purchase these great facilities that we're seeing?
I would have to research and look more into the details of how they funded. Some of them were for bond that went out for referendum and got approved by voters, but I don't know all the specific details on these communities.
I think that also brings up a point too, probably by the August meeting, if we could look and see a cost benefit. It's $53 million broken out over, I'm going to assume a 30-year bond, though we usually do 20 for durable product. 20 or 30-year bond, what are those bond payments annually? And then the gross versus net. For example, there are some savings by consolidating. Those should be factored in too. So we're looking at the gross annual expense or hit to the mill rate and then the net, after we, realize some savings on third-party rentals and so forth, post-construction. I think also looking at we've known, and one of the reasons we've sheltered a lot of these new projects and must continue to TIF is that we can take, I believe it's 15% of all value, or excuse me, of all taxes in that TIF account and apply that to a public safety facility. So what does that mean in order for us to get to a revenue neutral spot? In other words, having new taxpayers funding the public service safety building versus existing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've looked at a number of those scenarios, and I believe in previous presentations we kind of did, what would it look like at $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 home impact on the mill rate, and we'd be more than happy to project some different scenarios. I think one of the things that we realized as we started looking at doing that again was the TIF impact, B, we have seen a fairly sizable and substantial growth. So there are just so many different variations that it would be hard to pinpoint exactly what the impact would be. And obviously the impact in 2025 would be different than 2033. Hopefully it's all paid off by 2033, given that growth that is anticipated. So, that's kind of a sliding scale, but it's definitely something that we, have taken into account, but would be happy to get a couple of different variables.
The only other thing I'd like to add to council, and what's further in this report, as we talk about the public safety report that was done, was regarding Engine 2 and Engine 5 as well. So Engine 2, just for the public to know, council, I know you're aware, you funded part of that project this year in capital improvement. And then there's a plan for Engine 5 after this project is completed. And, but the theme here is infrastructure, facilities within Auburn. And let me just give you a couple dates so that you kind of know why we're where we're at. So if you go back to 1952, that's when Engine 2 was opened. Central was opened 1969. Auburn Public Works was opened in 1971. And then the previous PD location on Maiden Avenue was, I don't have it right here, but I believe it was 1975, 74, 75, somewhere in that range. So this is why we're talking about infrastructure, because we have all these buildings that were built in the early 50s to 60s and 70s. And so they're not meeting a lot of those needs that Chief Chase and Chief Moen was talking about, that public health separation for our staff, facilities. We're makeshifting things currently. The old PD, we took the pump room down in the basement and we made that into a woman's locker room. And we put, I think at the top was around four female officers into that old pump room is what it basically was. These are not the best accommodations that we're doing, but we're trying to make do with what we have. And when Chief Chase talks about future costs, that's what you're going to see at Central. Some future costs, just to meet some of those demands. But I thought these dates were important. I asked Derek to get that for me so you and the public would know this is the time frame that we're looking at. And now 50, 70 years later, this is why we're having these conversations because of our infrastructure. And as Megan said, I think the city has done a good job of maintaining that infrastructure, but some of it is just, it's not meeting its current needs.
Yeah, one last quick thing. This space here, Harriman Associates did a beautiful job with the site plan, and we have this nice courtyard out back, which is a fighting zone, a war zone between the police and pedestrians. The police don't want to be there, and the pedestrians don't want to get run over by somebody going out on a call, and so that's dangerous. And it just doesn't work the way it was intended to work, and it's because the police weren't intended to be here for 12 years beyond what they were supposed to be. And the other thing is we're leasing space, as the mayor pointed out. We're leasing space outside the building to house people that have to be there because we don't have room in the building because police weren't intended to be here.
I didn't know that was a courtyard. makes perfect sense. I had no idea. Be nice
And-
to
and
do
just
it.
so
I
we-
mean, kind of look. I think that might be nice.
And just so we're clear, there have not been any pedestrian vehicle accidents in the courtyard. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that.
I don't know. You keep the evidence room pretty much locked up, so we're not sure what's in that building. Is that all pumped out, by the way? That was okay. Is there any other questions? This obviously, I do think the financial aspect for full disclosure with the residents is important. Taking out what we've already allocated for engine 2, for example, and then really looking, in my mind, goes towards those allocations of TIF. What's our TIF percentage out right now? And there's a lot of conversations we've had over the years and this has always been in the background. So we've known this has been coming for years now. So we can't keep kicking it down the curb. So we're excited to get all the data in front of us. Is there anything else? Nothing, council? Okay. We're going to break at this point in time. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. We are now going to I think we're going to go into executive session. First one, time? Okay. So we're going to discuss economic development as pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056C, in which premature disclosure would prejudice a competitive or bargaining position of the city. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion,
Second.
Councilor Walker, second from Councilor Milks. All those in favor? Okay. We're now in executive session. We'll go from here directly into city council meeting in approximately 18 minutes. going to work on my smiling tonight. It hurts, Phil. Ready? Okay, I think we're live. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting for August 7th, 2023. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to apologize up front. It's been, 14 weeks since we've had a meeting last or something? I'm a little out of practice. Next on the agenda, first thing on the agenda, we have 4 consent items. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Councilor Staples, second.
Second.
Second by Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Opposed? None being passes 7-0. Next are the minutes of the June 20th, 2023 regular City Council meeting. Are there any corrections? None being, I'll entertain a motion this time to accept the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilor Staples, second by Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Pass 7-0. Next are the minutes of the July 10th, 2023 special City Council meeting. Any corrections?
Motion
None
to
be-
approve.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Staples, second by Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Opposed? One abstention. Passes 6-0-1. Okay, now we're going to move on to communications, presentations, and recognition. I'd like to start off today with a presentation from Project Support You, general update. So I'll invite the team. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. So it's been a while since we've been before you to talk about Project Support You. So first, I want to thank you all for your support for launching this program. We were officially launched in February of 2023 with ARPA funding approved by the City Council. So with me tonight, I have Lieutenant Harrington from Auburn PD, Catherine Ryder, the CEO of Tri-County Mental Health, and Steve Almquist from the Auburn Fire Department. In addition to that, we also do have the chiefs in the audience as well, so if you need additional questions. But we're going to ask that you just hold your questions to the end. We have a lot of data that you probably all noticed in your slide, in your council packets. We won't go through all of that, but we did want to touch on some of that. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Harrington.
To start with our data, so the impacts on calls for service, data that you saw in 2022 when we were here before you. These are some of our biggest call drivers that we felt would be pertinent for this position. And then as the program started, we're well on track to meet those calls. The program to date, we have 104 well-being checks, person cared for, medical, mental, and psychiatric problems. With the Project Support You worker was able to co-respond with first responders. And that's about 17% of that total call time. The outcomes, there's been 290 new clients since the program inception, through July 31st. 564 total contacts since the program inception through July 31st. And 274 of the 564 had at least prior contact with the PSY worker. It's about 48.6% of our prior contacts. One thing that the Project Support You is able to help us address is the homelessness crisis. Our PSY worker has made 246 contacts with unhoused or unstably housed individuals since the program began. About 30% of those numbers are repeat contacts. Kelsey's able to go out with us in the field, go to the homeless encampments, provide resources, and follow up. In addition, the Auburn School Department's community mental liaison reported 229 students identified between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023
chart is a chart showing you fatal overdoses beginning in the year 2009 and coming current to 2022. It speaks for itself in terms of the growth in fatal overdoses that we have seen in Androscoggin County. Notably, 21 and 22 are still not affirmed data in that they are still waiting on reports from the medical examiner's office, but those are fairly confident numbers. And so this is an epidemic that is both a stateside and a national issue that we will continue to address.
Real quick, make sure we're pushing the buttons too. I think when you speak,
not on.
it's been a while. Yes. Oh, I just want to make sure the people at home can hear you.
Okay.
So there's a little button right at the bottom of your mic. You sound great to us. Push to talk. Yep. You sound great to us, but I want to
Oh,
make sure
so
people
hold
at
it
home.
when I speak? Woo, look at that. I'm hot now.
Magical.
Do I need to repeat myself?
I would go back just to your beginning. Yes, if you could,
Okay.
please.
So this particular chart shows you fatal overdoses in Androscoggin County beginning in the year 2009 and coming current. Of note is that the data for 21 and 22 is still not fully affirmed as the medical examiner continues to process toxicology reports, but there is a fair level of confidence that they are accurate. You will note that the numbers continue to rise. We have an epidemic in our community, in our state, and across our nation. This particular slide is by age group, and as you can see, it affects all age groups, and we are working with individuals that are still in school and then beyond. And notably, I recently came back from a veterans conference where we were talking about this as a matter of national security as well, in that the report that I was given showed that 75% of folks that are military service age are not fit for service, either due to obesity, they do not have a high school diploma, and or they have some kind of a major mental illness, substance use disorder. So another topic of discussion for another time. You can also see the breakdown by gender is that there is double the amount of males that are completing as females. This one I threw in here because I think it's important. It's tomorrow's generation, and so we are still working very closely with pregnant and parenting women, and there is a wonderful new grant project in the state of Maine that is specifically tasked with addressing women who are seeking support for their recovery journeys. And of note, we saw a little bit of a dip from 21 to 2022, and so we are hopeful that those projects are moving us in the right direction. This is specifically Lewiston and Auburn, deaths caused by drugs, and you can see back in 2009 the numbers were much smaller than they are in 2022, though we appear to have leveled off from 2021 to 2022, and our hope is that that number will start to drop. This is deaths by substance, and most notably the dark blue line, which is deaths from fentanyl, which we know is exceedingly dangerous. The yellow line is cocaine. The next line, which is kind of a green color, is methamphetamine, followed by pharma opioids such as OxyContin, oxycodone, and heroin is on the bottom in orange. These are specific data trends for Auburn, and this is collected by law enforcement and reported over to our agency where we put the data graphs together. And you can see that there was a huge spike in December 2021 to January 2022, and that leveled off again in February, and then picked up again in the period of time from December 2022 to January 23, and is leveling off again. What is of particular note and important is the administrations of Narcan. Without those administrations of Narcan, the death toll would be significantly higher, and you can see administration of Narcan by our law enforcement officers on this chart. And total deaths, if you look at the black line, which is the line at the very bottom, is much lower than the actual number of overdoses. So those fatalities would have been much higher had it not been for the administration. This is data specifically to Kelsey's work and turned into us on her tracking reports, so you can see her total number of responses. Referrals generated with consent. Important to note, we cannot make referrals to other resources and services without someone's consent. So we execute a release of information that meets all of the licensing and HIPAA standards. 174 referrals were generated, 172 individuals that were unhoused that she worked with specifically through the program, and then 128 referrals for shelter or other types of housing. Only 8 individuals that she worked with actually declined to engage with her, and there were 9 that there was no contact on arrival, typically meaning that the address was incorrect and there was no one there when they arrived, and 579 other referrals, meaning that outside of housing, so often with one individual there are multiple referrals. Perhaps they're being referred for outpatient therapy, for housing, for medical care, etc.
Hello. So what we have in front of you is a slide that was in the presentation for the original proposal for the project. So this is just a snapshot of some cases that were thought to have benefited from a PSY program. And although these are from back in 2020, we could see similar type individuals needing care today in 2023. So one of the driving motivations for this program was its possible impact on frequent system users. And as we can see in 2022, just to kind of give us a benchmark of where we're at when we talk about that, in 2022, the fire department, we responded to 4,723 EMS calls with patient contact. So that means that there was actually somebody there, a person's name was placed on that report, treatment, care, or et cetera was given. Of that, the vast majority, 77% of those individuals, only called 911 for EMS one time. What you'll see in our next slide when we get there is that 30 of our referrals that were generated from the FD to the PSY program, of those, the average person called 911 for EMS 6 times prior to a PSY referral being placed by the department or PSY contact made. Next slide. So again, the fire department had generated 30 referrals to the PSY program. So these were individuals where, the PSY worker was not available, maybe it was in the middle of the night, something like that. And so the crews initiated kind of a referral to the program. This was broken up into a variety of categories. Our 3 main ones, mental health, homelessness, and substance use disorder. So 40% of it was mental health, about 10% was homelessness, and about a third was SUD. Again, this could have some crossover between categories, but we also have here too about 17% in what I called other. And this is kind of an area where I think maybe we have potential in the future. One of the areas that I see that this is, or an example of it would be, is the elderly patient who's wanting to age at home. Maybe they suffer from frequent falls, and they haven't quite been able to get the resources to get ramps put in place, or maybe Meals on Wheels, things like that. So not exactly part of the program originally, but PSY has been generous enough to kind of assist us in getting these citizens some sort